Hello there and welcome to the EUobserver Chat Show. MEPs talk about EU. Joining me here today to discuss the upcoming referendum on the Fiscal Compact Treaty on May the 31st in Dublin is Seán Kelly from the European People's Party. Thank you very much and good morning. Thanks for joining me here today.
Pleasure, thank you.
We will also have Paul Murphy, GUI MEP, but he's actually in Dublin for the next few weeks campaigning, and he's going to join us in the next few minutes in a virtual manner, so with video interventions. So before we kick off, we're going to start with a statement from Hugo Brady. He's originally a Cavan man, but he's been an EU watcher for the last 8 or 9 years, and he's a bit sceptical about this upcoming treaty, and he thinks it's going to be a hard one for the government to sell. Let's take a listen to what he has to say.
So, long story cut short, I still believe the treaty will pass, but I believe it will be tremendously difficult. And it will only be a narrow yes, because there's no motivating good reason for, and so much ambiguity about the treaty anyway, that I think it will depress the yes vote. And in Ireland it's usually essential to get the broadly pro-European majority out to the polls. Now I think that on one hand some of them simply won't agree with the treaty, so for the first time the yes vote will be split, and secondly there won't be enough motivation to go out and vote for something positive. Recently Ireland held a referendum on the establishment of sort of Senate hearing committees in the Irish Parliament that would have the power to call people before them and give evidence and so on. But the government couldn't communicate a positive reason why they were needed, and therefore the referendum didn't pass, even though there were other questions on the ballot that did pass. And that shows that voters are very well aware of what they're the questions in front of them. They're not just going to tick a box. And even though Ireland isn't, the recipient of a 67 billion bailout fund, the country is fully funded up until the end of next year and won't be locked out immediately from those funds. So it's not really a do or die situation. I think that it's basically the referendum result will come down to fear versus anger, because I don't believe the Irish are as pro-European as they were before, because of all of they're angry after 3 years of, as they would see it, EU enforced austerity, and in any case there has been a building no vote in referendums over the years. Ireland has not held a referendum without drama on an EU issue in a decade.
So that was Hugo Brady there. He said it's going to be a hard one for the government to sell. What do you think?
Well, the history books show that referenda in Ireland are hard to sell. We had this Lisbon Treaty and with the Nice Treaty rejected the first time. But I would also say that maybe a hard sell wasn't done, especially initially, because the governments and those in favour more or less took for granted that they would be passed based on opinion polls, and then that left the no side to have more or less a free run, and by the time they tried to correct it, it was too late. But I think in this instance I'm very pleased that the government parties and Fianna Fáil and all the others are making a big effort to tell the people what it's about, and then hopefully the people will respond.
And Paul Murphy from the GUI group from the European United Left, he's actually the only MEP who's here in Brussels who is calling for a no vote. Let's listen to what he has to say to that very question.
I think that it's not clear yet what the outcome will be. I mean, the campaign hasn't really engaged yet. There are opinion polls now indicating a shift towards the no side, which is obviously positive. I think a large amount of it will come to do with whether fear or confidence and anger gets the upper hand with the yes side, simply basing their arguments on scaremongering and fear, whereas we are trying to bring out the anger of people against the austerity that they've already experienced, but also the implications of this treaty, which would mean at least 5.7 billion euros extra cuts and taxes in Ireland, over 166 billion euros worth of extra cuts and taxes in Europe, and a devastation of the economy. But we'll see. I mean, the debate will really start in the coming weeks.
Well, the debate is kind of gradually getting started now, slowly but surely. The unions I've seen are calling for a no. But if Ireland does say no, it means that we're not going to have any access to this bailout fund, to the European Stability Mechanism. It's not the case.
Yeah, that's one aspect of it. And they're calling this an austerity treaty. I would call it a prosperity treaty. And I think that's the way we should sell it. Because if we do not pass it, then we will have a far less chance of having prosperity than at the minute. And particularly, as you pointed out, we wouldn't have access to the ESM, which could be vital for us. It's an insurance policy, as the Taoiseach has mentioned on a number of occasions, and it's understandable. Why should the rest of the European Union, particularly the Eurozone, make funds available to us, if we say to them, okay, you all agree to rules, but we want to be part of the club, but we don't want to agree to those rules, but keep giving us the money. That just doesn't work in any man's language, and it certainly won't work in this situation, and I think that people have to be aware of that.
See, I don't accept that. That's it's a stick that is being used to beat the Irish people with into supporting permanent austerity. What it's a reference to is a blackmail clause that was inserted into the European Stability Mechanism Treaty. It's outrageous that the government collaborated and effectively voted for the insertion of that clause that is being used to really interfere with the democratic process. But what the government isn't admitting is that in the event of a no vote, or even in the event of a yes vote, the government has the power, and the Dáil has the power, to veto the European Stability Mechanism Treaty and to demand the withdrawal of that clause. So, I mean, the responsibility here, if people do vote no, it'll be back on the government.
And do you think Ireland would be isolated if there was a no vote in the end?
Oh, we'd isolate ourselves because the treaty is going to go ahead once 12 member states agree to it. And if we decide that we don't want to be part of it, then that's self-isolation. So we have got to look at this in a very practical manner and say to ourselves that it makes sense to have balanced budgets, and basically that's what this is about, because that will create stability. It will guarantee citizens that every year when it comes to budget day, they won't have to be worrying about taxes being increased here, there and everywhere, because once you have balanced budgets, once you are spending more or less what you're taking in, then that will create great security for people and make it much easier for governments to plan into the future. But also it will restrict governments who might want to take the easy option and just borrow, and let the next generation be paying for it. That stops all this.
Paul Murphy doesn't agree. Let's listen to what he has to say. I don't think if he was here he'd call it a prosperity treaty. He would go with François Hollande and call it an austerity treaty. Let's have a listen to Paul Murphy.
Firstly, I think it's far from guaranteed that the treaty will necessarily go ahead without Ireland. I think a rejection in Ireland will provoke a big debate across Europe about austerity and about this treaty in particular. It will add extra pressure on François Hollande if he's elected as the French president. He has said that he will renegotiate this treaty. A no vote would add extra pressure on him to do that. It'll create further difficulties for the Dutch government that seems unable to be able to ratify the treaty. So we'll see. It can provoke a big debate. But in any case, I mean, it won't isolate the people of Ireland. It might isolate us from the political establishment and economic establishment in Europe, but it won't isolate us from ordinary people who are suffering under austerity in Germany, in Greece, in Portugal, in Italy, in Spain. That there are tens of millions of people who want Ireland to vote no, who will welcome a rejection of this treaty, and it can be the beginnings of a common struggle across Europe against these austerity policies and for a different Europe.
We saw this week François Hollande, he's really pushing for growth. He's saying the austerity policy of the EU is not working. He was actually backed by Mario Draghi, the head of the ECB, yesterday, who said indeed that we need growth. This is the Europe that people want, one of growth, one of jobs, one of employment.
Yes, everybody wants jobs and growth. And if you look at what Hollande is saying, he's in the middle of election. He's not saying very much really different to what's there already, other than wanting to add jobs and growth as a protocol. And there is really no difficulty with that, because that's what Europe is trying to establish. But this is just one part of the project, and this is an essential part of it in terms of creating stability and reassurance for the markets. And once things settle down, then we can have a climate where jobs and growth is going to occur. And already that is happening, because there has been a change of mood in the European Parliament in particular over the last 3 or 4 months, where President Barroso and Van Rompuy and so forth have been emphasising jobs and growth. They have announced the 80 billion, which unspent funding from cohesion policy and so forth, which is going to help jobs and growth. There's another 80 billion to be in Horizon 2020. And of course, the next multi-annual financial framework is going to be all about jobs and growth. But you have to have the fundamentals right in every member state to ensure that there's not going to be overspending constantly, and you do need some kind of a break on people who just want to overspend. That will stop, and then you will have a far better climate to create the jobs and growth that everybody wants. So I emphasise again, this is a prosperity treaty, not an austerity treaty, and I think those in favour of it should actually be emphasising this, because sometimes when you do not challenge what is being said by the critics, people begin to believe them. So I'm all in favour of this prosperity treaty.
And finally, to promote this prosperity treaty, just if we've any Irish viewers out there, which I'm sure we do, just sell this to them in 20 seconds. Tell them how it's going to improve their life and their future.
Well, I suppose fundamentally we have a choice to make. Do we want to be at the heart of Europe, on the periphery of Europe? Do we want to be inside or basically outside? And do we want to be leaders or followers? If we vote yes, it puts us at the heart of Europe, where we can influence what's happening for the betterment of Irish people and help to create a better Europe for all European citizens, obviously including Ireland, and particularly because of the advantages we have, which we have seen in recent times with all the jobs announced. Foreign direct investment is huge in Ireland. It will continue if we vote yes. There'll be a big question mark, not put there by us, but by those who want to invest where we are. And is Ireland the place to invest, or should we be investing in some other member state that's more committed to Europe and would have easier access to Europe? So it's a big question for us. Our future is at stake, and it really means that if we vote yes, we will be in a position to create great prosperity into the future.
OK, I'm going to leave you now with Paul Murphy's answer to that same question, and thank you very much, Seán Kelly, for joining me here this morning, and wish you a very happy birthday.
Thank you very much indeed. That was a secret, by the way.
Well, it's out now.
I mean, what's necessary is policies that go in the completely opposite direction to this treaty. In fact, policies that are outlawed by this treaty. The biggest crisis in Europe is the crisis of massive unemployment. 450,000 people on the dole in Ireland claiming some form of social welfare assistance. 25 million people across Europe, the highest level of unemployment since the introduction of the euro. The indications are that big business is not going to use the resources that they have to create jobs. In fact, you have significant profits being made and €2 trillion being hoarded effectively in cash by corporations across Europe. And so the only answer here, which is what is ruled out by this treaty, is massive public investment to create jobs in terms of infrastructural projects, public services, and so on. So that's the first point, that it's absolutely necessary. Secondly, you need, in countries like Ireland, in Portugal and Greece, to repudiate the odious debt that simply isn't our debt. It was built by speculators, bankers, developers in Ireland's case. It's not the responsibility of the people and is a massive shackle on the economy. So to repudiate that debt, to go after the massive wealth that does exist in Ireland and across Europe, instead of that wealth being used for private gain, to use it for the benefit of ordinary people, the benefit of society as a whole, and ultimately that the key sections of the economy should be taken into democratic public ownership. And let's have a plan for economic growth instead of just hoping that sometime big business is going to invest and create growth for us. I mean, what is needed is a fundamentally different Europe instead of a Europe for the billionaires, a Europe for the millions, a socialist Europe.